very happy to see so many and to have this wonderful list of speakers and also people here at Esra. First, I want to welcome Djenena Jalovcic. She is an associate professor at the Esra. She has a long-term experience in global rehabilitation, and she is also the leader of the project PrEP IP, and she is the initiative taker of this event today. Sitting in Canada, it's early morning for a good cause. So, floor is yours, Djenena.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As Maria said, our project, Persons with Refugee Experience and Education Project, was initiator of this ad hoc meeting for all of us. When we started the project in November, looking into the needs of refugees, 2.6 million people who fled Afghanistan, over 6 million who fled Syria, 1 million Myanmar, 2.3 million refugees in South Sudan, and 5.9 million refugees in Venezuela. We didn't think that another unprecedented refugee crisis will be hitting Europe. So in the last 13 days, over 2 million Ukrainians fled their country because of the war in Ukraine. And I think as citizens, global citizens, we do condemn this brutal invasion in Ukraine. And I also would like to call for immediate ceasefire and start of negotiations. As the wars are raging around the world, we are just generating more and more refugees. So on one hand, we do have to prepare ourselves to host millions of refugees around the world, to prepare our students to be able to respond to the complex healthcare needs of refugees. But on the other hand, we should really examine our roles in creating a better future for everyone. I was in Bergen last week, and I was in Bergen when the war started. And I was absolutely glued to the TV and watching the destruction, brutality, and escape from Ukraine. And to me, this is a very personal. 30 years, exactly 30 years ago, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the war was raging, and on a smaller scale. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a small country compared to what is happening in Ukraine. But seeing exactly the same scenario repeating made me really think, what is our role as outsiders in situations like this? So as I said, I survived the war. I was a refugee, and seeing that again in front of my eyes was really devastating and made me think that only in a collective action we can do. While I was sitting in front of TV alone, it made it really difficult even to think, and not to mention to have a hope. So we had a small meeting of a project team who was in Bergen and started discussing, and starting asking questions that we pose to ourselves. What is our role as an outsiders? What is our role as educators? What is our role as a global citizens? What we must do, what we can do, and how can we prepare our students to respond to the needs of refugees, but also how can we prepare our students to face the future with the hope for a better future in which there will be no wars and no refugees? How can we bring back human into humanity? How can we bring health and care to healthcare? So I often think of multiple roles that each of us play. I often think that although we see very much ourselves as neutral educators and our educational spaces and learning spaces as neutral places, there are no neutral spaces. All our decisions inside and outside of classrooms are not neutral. So how much do we need to engage ourselves in a political advocacy to pressure the governments to find the solutions for peaceful coexistence, for negotiating peace, for stopping the wars? So what is our role as advocates of peace? What is our role as activists for peace? When I think about it pedagogically, and when I think of our role in a classroom, are our classrooms safe and for all? And are we creating a space, learning space, to prepare our students to respond to the needs of refugees and displaced persons around the world? But are we also preparing them to be global citizens? In a way, when we are preparing people to respond to the needs, we are dealing only with the consequences. As healthcare professionals and healthcare administrators and managers and people who are working within healthcare system, we all know the importance of prevention and health promotion. I didn't think that I will, in my life, ever again need to speak about peace and being actively engaged in promoting peace and being involved in activism to stop the war. But unfortunately, that this is our reality, and we are, it seems to me, at the brink of even bigger disaster. So if we do not act, and if we do not put our collective wisdom and energy and actions, and if we do not maintain the hope in the future, it would be really hard to think about our role as educators. So I have to remain hopeful. And when I think about remaining hopeful in the classroom and creating a space of hope in my classroom, I often think about pedagogy of Paulo Freire, about pedagogy of hope. And however, as he points out, hope is not enough unless it is accompanied with action. So I'm really happy that we come together to put our thoughts together and energies together to act and to prepare ourselves for and our students for better future. So I'm ending this, although very bleak introduction, I'm ending it with the hope that collectively we can and we must do better to stop unnecessary human suffering around the world.
Thank you so much, Djenena, for an emotional and thought-provoking start of this event. I will continue with Rolf Vårdal, who's sitting here next to me. He's a physiotherapist at Center for Migration Health in Bergen. He has been working with refugees and issues related to refugees and migrants for very many years, both locally but also globally. And he wants to share his experience today from his work. So we're turning the camera over to him.
Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. When you say I've been working for a long time, it's been like since the last millennium, which makes me feel very old sometimes. But anyway, it's as both Maria and Djenena has pointed out, even before what happened now in Ukraine, we were like 82.4 million people forcibly displaced by the end of 2020. 82.4 million before Ukraine and before 2021. We are kind of lucky in the privileged West, because if you want to look at it as to be lucky, because 86% of those people who are forcibly displaced are hosted in the developing countries, 73% in the neighboring countries. And we sometimes make this look like a crisis for our welfare society and system. So there are some perspectives that we need to reflect upon, I think. Something I also think is very important is that when we meet refugees, in whatever situation we are and whoever we are, it's important that we don't look at this individual not just as a refugee, but also as a resourceful person, an individual with experience, sometimes experiences that are very different from our own, and we could learn something, definitely. But I don't want to, say that, oh, by no means, this means that we should not acknowledge and be aware of the losses many have had, but that we also have to recognize the other parts of this person. And the resources everyone, comes with is something that will be useful in the resettling process, in adapting to a new society. But I doubt, and my experience is that we don't always take this into consideration. But if we open up, if we get to the point where we can see the individual behind these quite difficult experiences, we might also learn something what it is to be human, and maybe humane also. So as professionals, we are kind of taught how to work with different issues relating to health. As a physiotherapist, it's like, physical pain, reduced capacity or impaired functions of one or the other kind. And that's an important knowledge to work with. But then we also have to remember we are human beings at the same time, and both the therapist and the patient belong in that category. And sometimes that's the most important thing, I think. As Djenena pointed out, this activism, advocacy, that's something we also have to consider, when we see the state the world is in right now, and has been for a long, long time. And the point is, I don't think that we should choose one or the other, whether we are professionals, whether we are human beings, or whether we are advocates. Maybe we can combine those to be professionals and human beings and advocates. And as a physiotherapist, my work is starting with working on the body in principle, but I have learned that humans are well equipped not just to work on the body, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So sometimes just listening to the stories people can open up on is sometimes the best therapy. I remember the best ever feedback I had from what in this relation is called a patient. This is a very polite person. He knows that our sessions are mostly limited, like 45 minutes more or less. So I remember one time he came to my office and he started talking. And he talked, I listened. And after about 45 minutes, he looked on his watch and said, okay, now the session is over. This was a really good physiotherapy session. So that's the best ever feedback I had. And not using my tools that are supposed to be the tools of a physiotherapist. So I think listening sometimes is a good therapy. And also when we meet people with different stories, difficult stories, just to be a supporter of their own and promote their own motivation. And there are like 3 letters, or the same letter times 3 in Norway, that a lot of people say, well, you have to accept TTT. Things take time, which I really think that we cannot always accept. We have to act sometimes and not just wait for someone else to do what they should do. To take this extra phone call, to send this extra email, it's really of a huge importance for the persons we meet. And also, I think as professionals, we can accept sometimes to be the guest. I recently accepted to be the patient, in fact. So I had a great shoulder neck massage by one of my patients. So I can recommend, we have to change the roles sometimes if the opportunity knocks on your door. And also, I think the topic of humor, seeing the funny sides of things in a very, dark environment is also a very, very good kind of therapy. So I think a lot of it comes down to seeing this, the individual we meet as a person with dignity. Not forgetting that, not being patient, not being a sufferer, but also a person with dignity. If I can just share one episode from a fieldwork, I was in Georgia just after the war in 2008 between Georgia and Russia, visiting a refugee camp where families were living for a time they didn't know how long or where they were going to go afterwards. So my job was to have a group activity for the young or the adolescents mainly. After we had done this, the grown-ups invited me and my interpreter into the next room. And they said, we are sorry, we have nothing, but please take this apple and take this cup of homemade liquor called cha-cha. That's all we have, but please sit down and let's enjoy this together. Which we did. And thankfully, we had a different driver going back to town afterwards. But I think this is just one example that we have to sometimes be on the receiving end of generosity and allowing people to feel dignified. Yeah. that's what I want to share, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rolf. As always, it's a pleasure to listen to your experiences. Next speaker out is Esra Alagoz. She is in Gaziantep, Turkey, where she is a physiotherapist and at the Independent Doctors Association. This association, IDA, was made by Syrian refugees coming to Turkey who are healthcare professionals, where they built up clinics throughout Turkey to help other Syrians and also Turkish people. So Esra, we're now very happy that you're here with us, sharing your experiences and things that you want us to take home with us of messages.
Thank you very much, dear Maria, and all the team members who arranged this meeting today, where we can have a chance to share our thoughts and experiences we had. As Maria said, I am Esra. I'm working in Gaziantep, Turkey, with refugees, which is a city where very close to the border. I'm 25 years old, and I have been dealing with refugees and their problems since I could say 7 years almost. First, I became I attended some activities as volunteers with them when I was young, like in my 18s. And then I was a classmate with them in the university. Then I worked with them as a physiotherapist, and here today I am dealing with them as colleagues in the office, and also I am trying to lead the project that we are trying to facilitate the life for the refugees living in Turkey, in Gaziantep. It is really sad to see what's happening in Ukraine. We were not expecting. When I'm thinking from time to time, when I was a little girl, like I was imagining how I would have life when I was young, and none of in my dreams I was expecting to have war victim friends or war victim colleagues or neighbors. That was definitely not what I was imagining. But this is life. There are always challenges, and some challenges are greater for some people. Our responsibility here, and that was the inspiration of me, why I wanted to work with refugees, because today I am in my house and I am living with my family and I have everything I need. And those who had to leave their home, I am not better than them, and it is not because I deserve better life than them. Absolutely not. This is just, as I said, some people have some challenges in life, and this is absolutely not because they wanted to have these challenges. So I am feeling deeply responsible of my life, which is very comfortable, and I dedicated my profession and my daily life to facilitate the life for these people as much as I can, because as I said, they are just like us, and as Rolf mentioned, they definitely deserve to be treated in a dignity, because as I said, they are just like us. There is no difference between what we call someone's refugee or a host community. It is just a status made by some people. It is really difficult to face with people when they had to leave their countries, whether it is from a very far country or it is someone living very close to your house. It is really devastating for them. And we as like frontline workers who are dealing with these people face to face, it is really difficult, and you have to be strong when dealing with them. Because they just left everything and they're coming to a new country. So you have to be as supportive as you can. And as Rolf mentioned, we should see them like they are the potential human sources for us. We shouldn't consider them as burden. We should see how we can develop their skills and how we can get advantage of their personal or academical improvements, or how can I say, skills they have. Yeah, let me say. Another thing is when we were talking about the education and how we can prepare the students and our health workers when they have to deal with the refugees or some migrants coming from a different country. This is the purpose of our project REP IP actually that we are working on. And this is a bad support, but with the new war in Ukraine, it shows that we really need to work more on this profession. I was thinking like for the short term aims, we should focus on the refugees or migrants who left their houses and how we can support them in a very quick way. For example, providing them some materials that they need. This could be an emergency healthcare. It could be like food and other materials. But I'm thinking about the long-term aims as well. For example, those who are the reason of war today, they were once a student, they were once a child. So it is really important to share with our students or with our children when we are trying to teach them something, and when we witness that they are growing, it is really important to let them know what the war means and how we should not interrupt other people's lives. I think this is really important. This is a very long-term aim actually, but with this project, I think it would be a great opportunity to educate our students how to avoid harming people, and at the same time, how we can support those who were in a way or another damaged by these unfortunate events. That's all from my side. I wish you all good luck, and we are looking forward to see how we can support these people more with collaboration, as Djenena said, because this is absolutely not a one-person job. We all need to have we all need to be part of the chain so that we can really create a real impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esra, for very important and insightful words from you. Next speaker out is Salvador Simo Algaro. He's a researcher, educator, and occupational therapist at the University of Vic in Barcelona, Spain. Salvador is doing research especially on mental health and social work, and has also experience from working in conflict areas. Are you with us, Salvador?
Yes, I'm here.
There you are. Good. Thank you.
To be with you. So, if you don't mind, I will just share a few slides because for me it's easy to explain from the images. And I want especially to highlight the message that Djenena has shared with us at the beginning about hope and action. It's a wonderful combination. And I want to say that although we are living in really difficult times, my experience, as you mentioned, Maria, I've been working in Bosnia 3 times, but also in Guatemala, the refugee camps, and also in Kosovo, working with the children, developing projects to prevent war trauma on the children, helping them to express all the terrible experience that they have to and unfortunately they go through the war. For me has been such a wonderful lesson of hope and resilience. So we need to learn from them, I think, because our first book, one of the books we published, was called Occupational Therapy Without Borders. The subtitle is Learning from the Spirit of Survivors. So today I mostly wanted to share with you this lesson of life, this lesson of courage, and this testimony of hope. But as she said, Djenena perfectly said, it's about action that we need to undertake for sure. So our mission when we go to the refugee camps mostly is to train the teachers, because we are always working from empowerment models, and we are always really achieve the goal that the children can express the traumatic events. We are not just asking for the drawings. We don't never say the children to write about the massacres. We just tell them, do a drawing about Jakovac, that's the city, so the children can draw about the war they want. They do it, but we never force. And then we ask them just to write a title and a little narrative about the drawing. So here you have some examples how really they are sharing these feelings and their emotions in such a powerful way. So we are really achieving the goal just to avoid this trauma. Of course, at the same time, we are working, detecting children who have already more traumatic events or traumatic situation status, and then we treat it in a special place at the schools also. But as you see here, really, they have gone through such a difficult events. Even they are sharing that they were afraid of dying. So when I was scared, I started crying. I thought my turn to die had come. But what's amazing for me is what I want to share with you today, that after they have this space to express these emotional situations, they start expressing these feelings of hope and happiness again. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult for us to work at the field. We spent, for example, 3 months working in Kosovo at the refugee camp there. The first month is very difficult because all the drawings are connected to war, but it's so beautiful from the second, third month when we start seeing this kind of drawings and we see this kind of narrative. So finally, after massacres, freedom arrived. In beautiful Kosovo, flower art blossom again. Children will have fun, play, and sing again. So I think it's a powerful testimony of hope, and also it's a testimony of the importance to develop these preventative war trauma interventions that, of course, we have done in several countries, and of course I would love to be able to develop new interventions connected to the situation in Ukraine. And I am so happy that through Interact project, but also now through PrEP project, we can prepare and educate our students to develop this kind of interventions. So that I think extremely relevant, as you start saying at the beginning, Maria, also we need to prepare our students to deal with this kind of situations, and we can do, and PrEP is going to be a wonderful place to do it. So this is, I wanted just very briefly, what I wanted to share, this message of hope from, and especially what I want to say is that also you mentioned from Bergen that it's amazing the resources and the capabilities of the communities. So we must be strong, but we must play hard and be active. But we need to be aware of that. I was really surprised, just the children after that had been 3 months, just living this war experience that had been terrible, how with a little support, psychological support from occupational therapy, it was amazing how strong they were and how they can overcome these such a terrible circumstances. So from University of Vic, let us to share with this message of hope, but actually this call to action. So thank you so much, our colleagues.
I wanted to say thank you so much, Salvador, for very emotional. It's emotional to look at these pictures, and I think it's important that we take this with us when we also both educate our healthcare workers and in our meeting with with our fellow citizens. Next speaker on the list is Sandra Schiller. She comes from Hawk University of Applied Sciences in Hildesheim in Germany. She works and do a lot of research on ethics and diversity and also international communication. She has been widely involved in different OT, occupational therapist group, for example, interest groups of displaced persons. And she also leads the work on developing occupational therapy services in Germany for refugees. Today, Sandra wants to share with us some issues related to associations and their response to, for example, what is happening now with war and many people on move or many displaced persons. So welcome, Sandra. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the nice introduction, and hello to all of you. I've been so focused on listening to all of you with all my heart that I find it really difficult now to switch into a speaking position. But from what I've heard so far, I would like to stress that it's my conviction that in the 21st century, we have all very specific types of citizens, and Djenena mentioned that, global citizens. So I'm very happy that when we're talking about a European crisis, we also have Djenena, Mike, and Ali here with us today. For me, that makes a big difference. And the second point is that I think in the 21st century, we also have different communities that we all live in. Esra mentioned that the kind of neighbors, friends, colleagues, and also patients she has today were not the kind of people she expected to be surrounded by when growing up. And I think that is a repetitive experience also in a lot of countries, unfortunately, that we have different people at different times coming in as refugees, and they already are part of our communities today, even though they're not always seen as such. And I think that's also something that Salvador illustrated very nicely with the picture of the children. So I would like to talk very briefly about my experience with professional associations, and that's mainly in the context of the Occupational Therapy Europe interest group, Displaced Persons, and then, as Maria mentioned, the German Occupational Therapy Association. And in both contexts, there's been an increased focus on the needs of refugees since 2015. And I would like to say, when we look at that, professional associations play an important role if they take on the humanitarian responsibility of what is happening. And I've been very happy to see that there have already been a lot of publications. As a matter of fact, I was very happy to see that one of the first responses to the Ukrainian war was a petition by Russian scientists and academic, and also a petition by Russian healthcare personnel against the war. This is very important. Secondly, professional associations have a scientific and a professional responsibility to advance knowledge, to prepare students in a specific way. And they have a political responsibility. And the way I have followed that, I'm very happy today that the Black Lives Matter movement has really pushed many professional associations to also see themselves in a political role and to make political comments on situations. And I think, again, that links back to Djenena's introductory statement. If we don't take a political role now and just look at the professional area, this will likely not be enough with the problems we are all facing today. So professional associations, of course, that concerns the area of education, research, and professional practice. If we look at education, it's a question of preparing students through curriculum development In my understanding, what I've seen, there's been some progress, but also very little progress. In particular, if you compare that to the massive interest of students in working as volunteers and in learning more about the refugee situation. So this is something where curricula really need to respond urgently to increase more learning opportunities and good learning opportunities. This is about practical professional knowledge that's needed, but it's also about students gaining critical reflexivity. And Rolf said earlier, there are some perspectives we need to reflect upon. And I think that's very urgently needed in the curriculum, looking at the healthcare system and the limitations that come with that, and that we can't just raise students to accept the limitations that there are in the healthcare system if these limitations lead to the fact that the needs of refugees simply cannot be met in the way that they need to be met. So I was then thinking also of the importance of advocacy and empowerment, but that's already been mentioned by other speakers. And moving on from education to the responsibility of professional associations, I would like to look at the role of supporting personnel. And I think here in Germany, we've seen a really interesting development that I've experienced in occupational therapy. And that is quite simply, in 2015, it was a lot of young people, a lot of students, young professionals who acted as volunteers, who went into new jobs opening in working with refugees. But to some extent, you could see that was a limited phenomenon. What we've seen in the last 2-3 years is, if I can call it like that, ordinary professionals who work as occupational therapists serving the general population come to the association's congress and say, I have so many clients these days who are refugees, and I simply realize that I don't have enough knowledge to support them properly. So this is not, working with refugees is not just a specialized area anymore for some people who are interested in that, but we just see it as parts of our communities today, that some people have refugee experience. So it's a matter of developing practical guides and guidelines, sharing examples of good practice, having position statements so that people feel supported, who take a certain political stance towards this situation, and then also more knowledge about interprofessional collaboration, the role of interpreters, psychosocial support for professionals also in this area. And then as a last point, and here I'm just briefly touching upon the area of research. We need research, we need more research, and maybe we also need different kind of research. I would like to end with the point that following the natural catastrophe in Germany last summer, with over 180 people dying in the flooding, brought up the discussion about research that the crisis response provided by volunteers, by ordinary people, is often much, or generally much more effective than the support that is provided by professionals. So it's been mentioned before by some other speakers, the question of volunteers. And I think when we talk about a professional response, we really need to clarify that volunteer support is something that needs to be the basis also for the work of professionals.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I hope you hear us now. The sound was not perfect, but your words are very important, so I hope everyone heard it. And I think we need to really listen to what you say now when we build our educational programs. Thank you a lot, very much. Next speaker I have next to me, my name sister Maria, but Puka-Jasdzyk. She works here at HVL. She is a coordinator of the at the section for interpretation in public sector. She has been working for 15 years as a professional interpreter. She knows what she talks about, and she will I want to discuss a bit then the role of interpreter. Why is this important when we talk about refugees and healthcare workers. So I will just turn the camera over to you, Maria, and simply leave the table for you.
Thank you, Maria. I hope you can hear me. As you said, I'm working with a program. We are educating interpreters here at HBL, and I've been working as an interpreter in 15 years. At the beginning, the Nana asked a very important question: how can we bring back humanity? This is a very complex question, and a question I will not even try to answer. But one of the primary need of every human being is to understand what is said and to be understood. And this is very important, where the role of the interpreter comes in some point. Every one of us in a professional situation probably will need an interpreter. So this is the moment where we at HBL teaching our students, where we can prepare our students how to work with an interpreter in a different context. An interpreter is a person who comes in extremely difficult situation when the lack of a communication appears, and an interpreter is a person who helps to understand both parts. An interpreter is a person, as we are teaching our students, that is not impartial or both partial. It means that an interpreter works for both parts. We are not working as interpreters for the person who ordered us. We are working for both parts to be understood. So in the context of the public sector, we are working in many areas, in very many sectors, also in the healthcare sector. So often a conversation via interpreter is a matter of life and death. So this is a very important issue. It is a very important thing to talk via interpreter. In many situations, we cannot count on the English as a common language. We need to understand that people have the basic right to be understood and to make understood in the language they originally speak. I would like to tell you some things how to recognize a good interpreter. A good interpreter is a person who both parts can trust. So trust is absolutely the main word here. And how to build the trust during a very short period of time, how to make it. It's a really challenging situation. Trust we can build by presenting the role, by presenting the frame, the method the interpreters are working, by telling that we have that we are absolute confidentiality in everything that is said, and that by the matter that we are going to interpret everything what is said and in a way it is said. So there are always some seconds that decide if the trust can be established or not, but it is a very important moment of the beginning of the conversation. Because usually we do not meet the interpreter in easy situations. we meet interpreters in a very demanding, challenging situations. So trust is very important. In order to answer the question that Nana said at the beginning, I would like to tell you that it's important to prepare your students that at some point they will need to work with an interpreter and how to work with an interpreter. Uh, it's um, it's a challenging situation, but an interpreter, professional interpreter, knows how to manage it. And by presenting the role at the beginning, it will help your students or other professionals to set the rules of the cooperation. We are usually telling our students then the conversation via interpreter is like a dancing in a triangle. So all three parts are important. So it's good to have the tools and the framework of how to cooperate, to build trust and to be understood and understand.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.
This is very important, and also happy to say that is a collaboration now between your education and the healthcare parts of the healthcare education here, so that we can give our students a bit more experience before they go out. Okay, so next speaker is Mike Landry. He is associate professor here at HVL. He is situated in Durham, North Carolina, the state, so also early bird. Mike is doing research within health policy and health services, and he is especially focusing on the gap between available resources and the rehabilitation demand. He has also had leadership positions within international humanitarian aid and development agencies in conflict and disaster settings. So we are very happy that you could join, Mike, and share your experiences. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Always hard to be the last person on a panel. I agree with many of the things everyone else has said. Thanks for those, not just words, but emotions that have been clear this morning. I have 5 things to say, and I'll make it rather brief because we're getting to the time. The first is Rolf began with numbers, and we all mentioned numbers, 82 million. It's very difficult for most of us to capture what that really means. So I'd like you to remember 3 numbers, 15, 16, and 60. 15, 16, 6, and 60. 15 is the percent of the global population who lives with disability. This is WHO statistics, so that's 15. In conflict areas, 16% of people who are fleeing as refugees experience musculoskeletal conditions. So you can already see that the 15% from WHO is the underestimation. 16% is the number of refugees who present with musculoskeletal conditions for which rehab can have an effect. 60 is the percentage of people with refugee experience who present with mental health diagnostics that again can be made better with rehabilitation. 15, 16, 60. Sometimes using percentages helps contextualize the scope and the magnitude of in this case refugees and their health status. Second point I'd like to make is the trajectory of somebody who has refugee experience is complex, generally beginning from the emergency situation through to an evacuation scenario, to temporary resettlement, through to hopefully integration, resettlement, and or reintegration into a new community. You know, all of those phases, health scenarios, health demands change. But also the priority of the health systems are often different across that trajectory. And so you'll see as we speak, it is more in the emergency situation for many in the Ukraine. It is also in the evacuation phase for others who have fled. Others have already made it into a different second or third country. And so at any given moment, an environment is very complex and you have people in very different scenarios. So I think it's important for us to think, when we think about people with refugee experience, what phase do they find themselves? If we know how many people are going to be arriving on the borders with different countries, what phase are they in? But it should also send a flare for what the world needs to do in terms of long-term resettlement for refugees who will be coming from the Ukraine. The third point I'd like to make is along that trajectory, the window to provide healthcare services and rehabilitation services can be narrow. And so it is indeed important to understand what the constituency of a population's health status is in order to provide the best possible care. As the window closes, so too, can you still hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. So too does the efficiency of healthcare. Oftentimes we can predict a patient's or a outcome based on when and how much services they actually received. Now, for persons with disability, through this trajectory from refugee, as they go through their refugee experience, many people are injured along the way. Many people already have disabilities as they make their way through the trajectory. And so the nuances are incredibly important. And again, that's why I think it's important to understand what part of the phase does an individual find themselves. The fourth, and second to last, the fourth point I'd like to make really is this event right now and many events that will happen. We see this many times. There is a lot of global interest and fear of what's going on. But this will wane. The interest for refugees comes and goes, not among us. I mean, this is the attentive audience here, but we know our job is to maintain not just energy today, but into the future. And if I may just reflect a little bit on something that Sandra said, indeed, it may or may not be the role of associations and society to be political. I don't want to take a political stance, but all I know is if indeed there are groups, and there are many in North America who advocate and argue for equity and equality for all, that should be for all, not just certain groups. And so I think we really need to understand that this will wane. So where is the opportunity for us to really engage in a long-term commitment, not simply to Ukraine, but for refugees around the world. The final point I'll say, just to reflect on a quote from one of the giants, at least in physiotherapy. His name is Alberto Cairo. He is about 43 years now as a physiotherapist in the ICRC in Afghanistan. He is one of the most amazing people I've ever met and been mentored by. But I'll quote him: "Dignity for persons with disabilities cannot wait for better times." We have to platform and argue for disability rights along with all other rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Those are important words that we need to take home with us. You brought us to Afghanistan, and we have a special guest actually to a final closer of today. That is Ali. He's in the meeting. He worked in Afghanistan as a psychosocial support supervisor until Taliban took over his country and he had to flee his country. He's with us today, and I hope that you, Ali, can share your thoughts and in this situation.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. As Maria introduced me very well, my name is Muhammad Ali Farhat. Yes, currently I am living as a refugee in Pakistan because Taliban took over the control of Afghanistan. So I had worked as a psychosocial support supervisor with a non-governmental organization that was Premier Urgency at Medical International. The project was sponsored by USAID. Yes, I'm so sorry because my internet is unstable. So currently I am facing too much challenges in Pakistan because we cannot go outside very freely and we don't have access to basic necessities such as food, work, and education. As you know, and all of you work, you are professionals with refugees, that most of you work with refugees. What I feel that there's most discrimination against refugees when I came from Afghanistan, and the way I faced too much challenges such as the police of Pakistan, they had put it only a Hazara nation in prison because they are from Hazara nation, they were not in other ethnic city. So it was what I was facing during of my journey when I fled from Afghanistan. Nowadays, I am watching this crisis in all of the world because people of Afghanistan, especially those who came from Afghanistan, they kept it behind, and the whole world only focusing on the Ukraine wars. They are not. They have discrimination against refugees because all of the refugees don't want to flee their home countries, but they are obligating. They are mandatory. They unwanted to leave their country, but because of violence, because of war, and because of other sophisticated elements, they are fleeing their country. It is very bad experience that I had faced in my life. So it is the time that I am very happy that this interprofessional team are working together to raise the voice of refugee in this in the government should hear their voice and work with them equally, not put some of refugee behind. And in 3 decades we had war in Afghanistan. It was a very bad experience that I had faced in my life. And just started this war in Ukraine. It is the political policy in the world, especially in Europe. Yeah, thank you so much for giving the time for me.
So much, Ali. We managed to get you back into the meeting. So I hope with your words, we will end this session, and I hope everyone uses these introductions that you know have had for further discussions within your organizations and for future work. There has been said a lot of very, very important things today. So thank you again, everyone, for your contribution, and have a nice continuous day.